Justin.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Living the dream. Mute you from the TAO staff side. So those are our rules of engagement, and without further ado, to kind of introduce our background on business continuity, I am going to thank our fantastic sponsor for this 5-part series that we envisioned 2 weeks ago, when we thought it was 2 weeks of working from home, and now we're seeing the reality is a little bit different. But Comcast Business is an amazing partner of ours, and so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley Powers, who's the marketing manager for our region, and has really been a critical part of bringing Comcast together to support some of the topics that we have coming up. So when we finish, I'll be able to share with y'all what that's going to look like for the rest of the next couple of weeks. And so Ashley, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Kara. So yeah, as she said, TAO and is a longtime partner with Comcast Business. And at Comcast Business, we're really committed to all the people we serve. When Kara approached us about this virtual series of topics kind of relevant to the daily changing landscape, really focused on the infrastructure business needs to function in a virtual work from home world. Business continuity was one of the front runners and really needed to take a front seat with the need for social distancing. So we brought on Point B, a management consulting firm that has experts that regularly advise businesses on continuity through various disasters. Today, we are joined by Amy Hoyt, a senior associate with Point B, who has experience consulting global organizations on business continuity, including pandemic planning and preparedness. In our prep call, I learned a ton, and I hope all of you learn a ton. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I am not going to share my video just because I think it's going to limit the bandwidth, but best practice I probably should be, but I think also right now there's a lot of people on the call and it just might hinder our ability to stream as effectively, so I'll leave that off. Hello, everyone. I've been doing business continuity for over 20 years, and I've been with Point B for 3.5. I started out doing continuity of operations and business continuity disaster recovery for Booz Allen Hamilton. And I created the plans for the USDA, Veterans Affairs, U.S. House of Representatives, and a bunch of Department of Defense clients with cleared security access. But I'm a Northwest girl, and I really wanted to move back to the Northwest, so I came to Seattle and I went to work for Starbucks International, and I created their very first pandemic response strategy plan and implemented it, along with continuity of operations for their worldwide support. And I worked with the United Nations on public and private coordination for that response. I've also did a lot of coordination with McDonald's and Walmart as we rolled out our H5N1 plans in Asia Pacific, which were active. And I've done disaster recovery work for Microsoft along with a bunch of other clients as well. I'm happy to talk to you on a subject that I think is so relevant and beneficial right now, especially in our daily lives on both a personal and a business related front. And I hope that what we talk about today can be a value add to you. Justin, did we want to go to the topics or the questions that people had, or do you want me to just dive in and start talking and people can ask questions as they like?
Yeah, why don't you dive in and we'll start fielding questions as they go along.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think I first just want to say that it's important just to have a plan and make sure that you're putting it into action right now, and that you've got a team of people within your company that are really thinking about crisis communication and crisis management for all the different things coming at them. So whatever that looks like for your organization, having those roles and responsibilities defined is super important, because it really comes down to how are you going to survive this? How are you going to make sure that you're doing what it takes to stay relevant and keep your businesses and your function moving forward? have a clear goal in mind. So when you think about what you're trying to do, think about where your core is with that. And I say that because in a lot of cases, it's really around your employees, your customers, and your stakeholders. What are you doing to make sure that they are forefront being taken care of, and that you're looking around the corner to assess the potential impact as the outbreak really starts to affect your operations, your supply chain, your travel, your finances, all of those functions within human resources, etc. It's not going to be the same for every single area. Definitely having regional aspects to it is important. Oregon, I know, just got locked down, and the governor issued an order there. That's not out of line for what the plan for Oregon is within their pandemic plan. Having awareness around what state, region planning is in place for your government entities is really important as you think about how you're going to respond as well. It should be in somewhat sync with what they're doing. Washington also has a plan. I happen to sit in Washington right now. And I was a reviewer on that plan quite a while ago. So they've had a process in place for a long time, and being aware of that and making sure that your business can not just be reactive, but proactive to what they've got in place. They have plans for all kinds of things. This is just one of many that they've thought about with continuity and for essential functions for the state. So the main question is, how are you set up to not only survive, but thrive in this situation? Pivot your thinking to see this as less of an adversity and how you might see it as a benefit to your organizations. There are definitely functions and businesses out there that are seeing sales and opportunities for their business to go up. And rethinking how you might structure, market, or think about your business and how you're meeting the needs of your customers right now is super important for how you're going to be able to survive in the situation from a business standpoint. When you're thinking about your plans and you're thinking about how you're going to respond, one of the things that you really want to think about too is what triggers will prompt you to escalate. Decision makers within an organization want to feel comfortable that they're making the right choices in the right time. And having thought of that ahead of time helps them feel confident that they've got the right plan in place. So what triggers are prompting escalation to the next level of either forcing people to work from home, or and in some cases it's going to come back to, at what point are you going to allow people to go back to work in a normal capacity? Have you thought about your plans and at what point you're going to say, okay, when you do come back to work, this is what it looks like, and this is what we're thinking about for how you're going to engage and come back into the workforce. So not only thinking about your escalation planning, but your de-escalation planning, and what are the trigger points that decision makers can have to feel comfortable that they're heading in the right direction. I'm just going to stop for a minute and really deep dive a little bit on what I mean by triggers. In a pandemic situation, which is what we're in right now, the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually has 5 phases to a pandemic response. And we're, in some cases, I know in Washington, we're in phase 5, which is the strictest or the most planned worst case scenario. So it's not worst case scenario, it's just what they've planned for as far as how far they're willing to plan out for what that means for restrictions. And being aware of what your different phases are and how you're responding or setting up what your reaction is going to be will help you be able to think about what you're going to be doing for actionable items within each phase. So you can think of that as far as continuity is concerned too, and when it goes to significant, minimal disruption, there's different levels for planning, and you don't want to overreact or underreact, but you need to understand what trigger points you're moving from one phase to the next. Another thing that would be good to think about is how you're going to track the impact to your business that this pandemic has, as far as how it relates to additional expenses, how you're spending your time differently, and what's the full cost of this to your organization. Tracking this information may help you when it comes to thinking about disaster loans, tax implications when it comes down to it, and write-offs for the future. If you're not tracking it now, you don't know what the true cost of it's going to be in the end. So my suggestion is just start tracking or having a way to track people's time and money separately so that you're aware of how this is actually impacting your organization. And then the other thing is how are you benchmarking against like type companies? Thinking about, are you looking at state, local, and federal government? Are you thinking about organizations like Technology Associates of Oregon is a really great place to plug in like this so that we can see how other companies of like type are doing and responding so that you are staying up with what's happening within your industry. And you're not reacting, but you're proactive in your response to what's going on. I think the thing that I get asked a lot is, what about our people, our offices, and our travel policies? What's the best practice in this area? And I like to think that the number one thing is to protect your people. That includes your full, your part-time, your contractors, your temps. Keeping in mind that the heart of this is really challenging and it's a health crisis. People are worried, they feel vulnerable. How are you responding to let them know that you get it and you're thinking about your business differently? It's not business as usual. When people walk into your organization or they're interacting with you, they should really get the feeling that you really get it, that you understand this is not business as usual. You know, if you walk into a doctor's office, you want to make sure, or you want to see that they're taking it very seriously with the extra cleaning, maybe taking your temperature as you walk in, you know, wearing those masks. This is not how you normally would interact with your care provider, but at the same point, this is different times. So how are you as a business showing that you're doing things differently and you take their health seriously as they're interacting with you? Also think about how you plan to handle the absences that are coming from employees and workers, because it's an impact to the business to not have those people available, but at the same time, we're seeing a lot of changes in pay policies. And it really doesn't matter why an employee isn't there, as far as they could be out caring for a family member. They could have disruptions because of school closures, and they could be trying to stay far away just because they have kind of a health risk or something like that where they don't feel comfortable coming in. How are you adjusting your pay and your policy towards pay in this unique environment so that you're taking care of those situations? And how are you supporting your people? You know, there's a lot of foreign nationals, there's a lot of conversations going around about different ethnicities. How can we reach out and make people feel comfortable that we understand and we have their best interest at heart, and that they're, you know, they're even facing a little bit more of a difficult situation just because of the I want to say discrimination at this point in time. So taking care of the people that that need it the most with a little bit of extra. Yeah, and then of course, I think travel speaks for itself right now. We're just saying, you know, everyone's just kind of getting the picture finally that it just really just needs to be a stay-at-home time. I think the interesting thing, and then I'm going to open it up to questions, is that historically, when it comes to business continuity planning, we're always thinking about how we can do things manually. One of the first questions that we do when we go in and do a continuity plan is, all right, if you had to take this system that supports this process and say it isn't there, how would you do that manually? What's interesting about a pandemic situation like this is we're actually doing the opposite. Technology is becoming more important, and we're kind of turning that continuity planning on its head. And we need more technology and the support of technology in this situation because we have people working remotely. So the more that you can think about how your technology supports that remote workforce and that extra strain that we're seeing from the providers is important as well, because there's just a lot more lack of interaction and not that manual process that we typically plan for. All right, I'm kind of done talking for a minute if anyone has any questions.
Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay, this is Kara. So since I'm running the Zoom, I can't actually see what's going on since I've got a slide up. Amy, one of the things that we talked about last week was what should a company do today? So obviously we're already in the midst of this pandemic. So we've gotten orders from various officials. I think we're all trying to understand and figure out how to keep folks working. Like, what should be a business owners or leaders like step in the near term? What should they focus on this week?
Yeah, I think obviously first and foremost is taking care of your people, making sure they're okay and that their needs are being met. But the second piece is around the business aspect of it. I think it's a good time to look at your business and see where there might be opportunity to pivot and make this instead of a difficult situation, something that you might be able to benefit from and start working towards that end to just survive and make sure that you're doing what you can. Also move from at some point being reactive to being proactive. I saw a question someone asked prior to this where they were like, hey, where's the templates and resources for creating a continuity plan? And I'm seeing some templates and resources being printed out in different areas. For example, Washington State, I went to their website today and they have a small business plan for continuity and pandemic response. And there are opportunities out there to start thinking about not only, hey, we're in level 5 right now, so we're kind of at the worst case scenario of where we have planned to be, not necessarily that the virus is going to stop, but this is kind of the top of where plans kind of are at. So now that you know that, how can you be effective in this world that we're in right now, but also how are you going to plan to get back to the normal operations when they do come? So there's two pieces. There's one, setting yourself up for success in the moment, thinking about your business, what's critical to you, what are your critical processes and functions and business need, and making sure that you're on top of keeping those going and active and viable. Second, how can we maybe do things differently so that we're staying profitable? And third, how are we thinking about getting back to business as usual when the time comes? And what's that going to look like for us?
I think that's a big question. What's that going to look like for us? I think Justin has a question in the queue.
Yeah, we have a question from Jen Anderson. How do you recommend that we document this plan and who should have access to it?
This plan meaning, I'm assuming, business continuity, pandemic plan, and then who should have access to it. Good question. I think that your leadership definitely needs to have access to the plan, and the decision makers, as well as any identified critical personnel that are critical for business operations, and they need to know what they need to know. So there are certain aspects like how many people you're expecting to maybe have absent, and how you might think about handling that on a regional level, and how that might look for pay. Those might not necessarily need to be disseminated broadly, but people need to be aware that the plans do exist. They are there for the decision makers to use as tools for in the moments, but not necessarily everyone needs to have all the information that's in there.
Great. We have a couple of other, or a few other questions I was going to go through quickly that we received during the registration process. So we have another question from Michael Woodmansey. What are some coronavirus relief for business options you might recommend?
That's a good question. This is just some things that I've looked into myself. I know that the SBA definitely has some relief opportunities. If your state has, and I don't know this for Oregon, I apologize. I know Washington was just declared an emergency or disaster situation by the federal government via President Trump. And what that does is it opens up relief and opportunities for businesses on a much broader scale. But if you do end up filling out the application for the SBA, they want to directly attribute your ask to coronavirus specifically, which is another really good reason to track your cost and your information on that. For how that works, or how much that impacts your organization. So there's the SBA, there's the disaster declaration zones that get additional consideration. I know that the states are offering guidance for relief as well. And those are in some cases still in the works. They're not necessarily fully vetted yet because they're still passing legislation in a lot of cases to get that relief. I think it's going to be more coming than it is right now, but there is opportunity there for sure.
Awesome. Do you have any suggestions for a template or resources for creating a documented business continuity plan?
Though there is a methodology used to create business continuity plans that follows along the lines of figuring out what your most critical processes and functions are, and then writing the plan based on that. So I personally don't use a template because every business type and situation is very different. I use a methodology, but I do know that there are government organizations, like I know that the state has a template or a plan, and I think SBA does too, that kind of give an opportunity for you to just plug and play with their overarching template that they have.
Great. We have a question in the chat from Riley. What are more practical considerations for business continuity, like backup procedures and customer communication?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I want to leave some space if Ashley wants to help out with this from a Comcast perspective, but I think business continuity is turning more towards that, as I said, IT capability and function. And I think one of the things that really we're seeing a lot of is obviously remote work. And if you have not already, making sure that you have, what are we on, Zoom right now, or webinar? That capability for people to collaborate effectively is super important, because communication right now is just, it's how we're operating and not being in the same location. You know, there's Zoom, there's Skype, there's webinar, there's Teams, there's Blue Jeans, there's a myriad of different opportunities there, but also thinking about how your employees are able to access information. For example, do you have things locked down security-wise where they have to be in a location in order to get onto a certain server or function or SharePoint site? Maybe think about that, as well as, you know, my current client is in a lab environment, and they've had to move to figuring out how to do electronic signatures, because even touching the same pen, signing in and out, all of that kind of stuff, you know, for time cards, they're trying to rethink all of that, because you can't have people working remotely that have to be on site to sign a document. So knowing what's going on in your business and why people are needing to gather and come to work or come to a particular location is super important. Dig in and figure that out, understand what their challenges are, and try and figure out how to do that remotely or with little interaction.
Awesome.
Oh, and thank you, Jen, for posting that blog site for loan and relief resources for small businesses. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions from Lauren Wilkins. What focus or investment from technology and tools would you recommend during this time?
I think I would kind of repeat what I had kind of thrown out there, is the communication piece, whether it be Zoom, Skype, webinar, Teams, Blue Jeans, whatever flavor of communication, I think is very important to make sure that you have invested in for people to be able to collaborate and work and communicate well. Ashley, did you have anything you wanted to add in there from a Comcast perspective?
No, I think, I mean, what you've been saying is really just focus on the communication piece and what options are out there that are free, or what you need to purchase to keep your employees and the business communicating with each other.
Yeah.
And then this other question is really good. Once restrictions are lifted, what steps can companies take to re-engage and bolster financial health and employee client morale?
Oh, I think that's really an individual question. I'm going to open it up if anyone else wants to say anything here. I think it's a great one. I think there's so much that can be done in this area. I think it's just getting people, you know, I think frankly, I'm going to start out, but feel free people jump in here. I think right now is the time to really focus on keeping your employees, stakeholders, and customers engaged. This is a new world. And I have this funny meme where it's like, hey, introvert friends, reach out to your extrovert friends. They're not okay right now. Like, how are we helping people to stay and feel like they're part of the bigger picture in the moment? So, you know, I just had a couple virtual happy hours this week where we brought our own glass to the table and chatted. So check in on people. It takes a lot more effort when you're not looking them in the eye, but how can you make sure that your people feel engaged right now so that when they come back together, they felt part of the picture the entire time and they felt like you cared and that you had their best interest as you were moving through this process. It's stressful. It very much has taken an impact on people. And I think making sure that they feel valued in the moment is going to be a really important thing. And you know, this is going to take a while to recover from both financially and from a health standpoint. Our systems are going to be strained. So how can we make sure that the companies, you know, that we're engaged with are remaining viable, profitable, and able to weather the storm as we think about it. So re-engaging back in, I think that's going to, people are going to be excited to get back in and and re-engage and go to work and all those kinds of things, but keeping them motivated right now is really important too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Our association specifically, we're trying to use, or we're expanding a digital community platform called Mobilize that we were previously using with sub-communities, and we've decided to focus on the entire community as a whole to keep everybody engaged and communicating so that we can continue to share ideas and collaborate during this time. And hopefully that will keep everybody, you know, connected as we move forward.
Yeah. And then, you know, after this call too, we've got at Point B, we've got a really great future of work document out there on how to work remotely effective, or set up effective work remote opportunities for employees, et cetera. So, you know, I think I can pass that on and we can send that on if you're interested in that. As well as I think I've written an article with Denise on how to do supply chain planning and continuity stuff considerations. So we can send those on as well.
Yeah. I do have another question. What kind of opportunities can be found for businesses who don't already have a plan during this current time of crisis?
What opportunities?
Yes. I imagine.
Help me out with this one.
Hang on. We're getting clarification.
I think if you don't have a business continuity plan right now, it's a really great time to think about putting together, if nothing else, a playbook for how you're handling this crisis situation that we're currently in. And that might mean taking a look at how you're handling the different aspects of your business based on the situation that we're in. And just like in my head, I'm thinking, write down all of your functions: operations, supply chain, travel, finance, human resources, whatever that looks like, all those different pieces, and then figure out how your sales and marketing, another one, customer service, write them all out, all those key functions, and then figure out how in the now you're going to respond, or you're thinking about responding. Like with human resources, when you hear the number 35% of your workforce may not be at work for whatever reason, what's your pay policy going to be in that moment? Is it the same as before? Is it going to be the same moving forward? What's it now? What's it going to be? And you know, how are you going to handle all the different absenteeisms? Are you going to keep track of why they're absent and then bucket it in different categories? Are you creating new policies in this world for how you're handling everything from working from home to how they're, you know, how often employees are required to check in? this is a new world. This is not normal operations. So thinking about not only what your guidance is going to be for your internal and your external people, but also when that will change and what it will be. Because as we go back to normal, the first question is going to be like, hey, do I still get the same sick leave time? Do I still get the same considerations for working from home? You know, what's it going to look like, and what are your expectations when this is all said and done? Which hopefully will be soon.
Great. Are there any other questions out there? Feel free to add them to the group chat.
If there's not, I'm just going to keep talking and say that, you know, this is also a time to reevaluate or rethink or even keep your same culture. So how are you moving from, in some cases, hey, everyone needs to be at work from these hours to these hours, to what does it mean to have an intentional culture around working remotely? Like, what are we thinking about when we say people have to be working remote, and what that looks like, and how are we going to be thinking about what our culture is going to be as people are not in the office?
Great. We have a quick poll that we wanted to send out to everybody. It's how effective are you able to be at home with your current technology, just to kind of see what's out there.
Yeah, I think this is a really important one from the standpoint of just making sure people are able to be effective. And if anyone has any questions about opportunities to collaborate remotely, you know, there's great tools out there now, like OneDrive for business, there's Box, there's SharePoint Online, you know, you can do virtual whiteboards. There's definitely the opportunity to explore and see what's available for what you need in your space. I have noticed that some of the providers are actually limiting functionality because of the strain on the system. But, you know, for most of the meetings I'm going to, which has never happened historically, we're all sharing on video screen. So
right now, out of everyone that's answered the poll so far, we have one individual, we have 15% investing more personally to be more effective, 29% working, everything's working okay, and 58% are experiencing no problems at all.
oh, that's great. Yeah.
So it looks like for the most part, yeah, we had one more add to working okay. But it doesn't look like we have anybody that's not effective at all or anyone that's limited. So it's looking pretty good.
That's awesome. I think actually our system within, I don't want to speak for the whole United States, but I really think our system is being tested quite well for how effective we have remote opportunities available, given how many people are working from home. So I'm a little surprised on the good side that we're doing as well as we are with the opportunity to have that stay at home in place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was Kara who mentioned that Netflix is not allowing streaming in high definition, so that could also really help.
Yeah, that was surprising. I didn't know that.
Uh-oh. I think I'm frozen. Can you guys hear me? Oh, there it's back.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like most people have what they need to be effective from home. That's awesome. You know, I think about the people that are not necessarily able to go into the office and how we're doing with that too. So this is great though, that people who are able to be effective at it. Any other questions, Justin?
Not that I'm seeing. Oh, here's one. As organizations and governments respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact, do you believe it will build resilience to survive any future shocks?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think so. I think this is testing people's plans to the fullest extent as far as how they're doing with pandemics. But, you know, the lessons that we're learning now and putting into place are historically significant in how we are able to respond and deal with different situations that come at us. Of course, not every situation is the same, but planning for a workforce that's not available and planning for how to survive in your operations when they're strained and or scarce, I think forces us to be even more resilient moving forward. So I think it's a great time. You know, you can always plan, but nobody, you know, and especially when I was traveling the world, kind of rolling out a pandemic plan before, it's always like, yeah, I'll get to it when I have time. I'm in operations and I need to do the sales right now. I need to get the money and get the, you know, return on investment in the moment. This is forcing people to not just plan for it, but to actually implement those plans. And we always do better with our response and capability when it's in the moment. So I think that in a lot of cases, no matter how well we planned, responding in the actual moment yields the best results as people have it to deal with in front of them. And we're seeing, I mean, you can tell the difference between companies that have put together thoughtful plans and are proactive about it. I can tell you, like looking at Microsoft, right? Like they had a pandemic plan. They've had one for a long time. So has obviously Starbucks. They're not new to this. They've thought about it ahead of time. And you can see that they're instantly moving to, hey, WHO came out with new guidance. Here's where we're at now. We know exactly what decisions that we're making. Even if they don't put the plan in place, they put the plan before the leadership team. And that's where they can go off to feel comfortable that they're making the right decisions in that moment.
Well, great. Are there are there any key takeaways or specific highlights you'd like the participants to walk away with?
I think just thinking about things differently. This is not normal. This is not our normal operation. So how can we think about things in a new way? And also how that could be translated into good. You know, it's easy to get anxiety and feel like doom and gloom, but that doesn't have to be the case. There is definitely a resiliency that's happening right now that I think each organization can take a look at and see how they can pivot and make the best use of this as possible. So that, and just making sure that you're focusing on taking care of your people, because that will, I think, come back as a benefit and an investment for the future.
Amy, do you have one best practice for taking care of your people? And I'm asking because of all the anxiety producing news. So I know today on LinkedIn, I took an opportunity to talk about our furry work from home buddies, or feathered or reptilian, to say, hey, like, let's post something that's that's not quite as scary, but a little more warm and fuzzy. And it's been great to see folks engaging and sharing their dogs. Also, there's a lot of really cute dogs in the Tech Association's network, so check that out later on our LinkedIn feed. But I'd love to know if anyone on the phone is doing anything interesting for their employees, or if y'all have anything at Point B that you are suggesting currently today.
Can you repeat the question? Was it around
Like
what we
are
can
you
get
doing?
as guidance?
What are you doing to make the people feel more connected? Like, are you sending
Oh.
out gift cards or downloadable books, or doing team lunch but still just doing it remote?
Yeah, so team lunches are remote, which are super fun. We've had happy hours. One of the fun questions are coming up, like, hey, let's start this happy hour by showing your oldest piece of clothing you have in your closet. And that was hysterical. How are you taking time out of your day? Please post a picture of, how you're taking time to walk away from your computer today. And there was some gorgeous photos that came in, obviously, of different things people as they were going for a walk or a jog or whatever. My kids are being homeschooled, and they're typically behind me at their desks right now. So just have some grace with those that are trying to manage homeschooling their children and their interruptions. And my dog does not have the best timing for barking. So I think there's been a lot of taboos about working from home that just have to change because of the environment we're in. So I think that there can be some levity to it. I don't know about spending any money, but there's just opportunities I know our one-on-ones, the people we report up to, have been tasked to check in on us and make sure that there's a regular cadence of communication going on, so that we feel that we have a forum to say, hey, I just can't work on Thursdays. Or one of the guys that I'm working with right now, his wife is a nurse and he has 3 children under the age of 4. And he's home full time with them. So the rest are just trying to juggle with, hey, when does your child go down for a nap? Let me schedule a meeting around that time. Let me know if I can just text you and you're in the middle of whatever that looks like, the chaos of the moment, but trying to still make sure, one, he's able to stay engaged and feel like he's doing, work that he's able to do, but also just making sure that we're accommodating what he needs. So yeah, there's just a lot of different things going on, but just the more you can make it fun and interactive and checking in on people, I think is super important. There's a lot of people that don't have a spouse and they don't have kids and they're by themselves, and they start to wonder if anyone really even cares. So
I like what you said about a schedule. We started over here, we generally have a weekly staff meeting, and we've started doing a daily stand-up, which is nice because it means by 9 o'clock you have to be ready to go. And we asked today that folks maybe send a wrap-up email at the end of the day saying what they did, where they ran into obstacles, just to kind of invoke some sort of structure so that people feel like they what they're doing is still really important, because it just looks different.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Justin, did anyone throw in any interesting ideas that they're doing to connect with their employees in the chat?
I haven't seen any ideas yet, but I have one more question.
Fantastic.
For any organization that finds itself without any sort of BCP and is starting from scratch, what are the first few steps it should take or decisions they should make?
Yeah, good question, Ashish. So I think the first thing would be to find out what your most critical functions are and identify those. So those are typically done through a business impact analysis. So you kind of take a list of all of your functions within the organization, and then you narrow it down to what are the most critical for you to continue operations. Once you have that, you need to figure out how you might look at those differently and or think about resiliency or redundancy in those processes. So, right now I'm working with a manufacturer who is concerned because there may be delayed shipments coming out of China for some of their supply. So they've actually contacted their suppliers to find out where they're at as far as service level agreements, and figure out if there's an alternative source, because in some cases you might have a contract with your supplier. So what does that look like to rethink about that contract and or think about getting that supply differently. I'll give you an example. When I was at Starbucks, we were quite dependent on solo cups. Come to find out, when we thought of that as a critical part of our supply chain and we called solo, we were not number one for their customers as far as who got order of priority in a situation where they'd be limited on capacity or resources. It was Pepsi. So then we had to think about what would be the situation if we were unable to get paper cups, and how could we maybe think about an alternative sourcing opportunity? Because if you only have one sourcing stream and you've cultivated that and you don't have others, you're vulnerable right now with the situation on our supply side if it comes out of certain segments of the world or anywhere. So like, it might cost you more money, but what are you thinking about as far as sourcing locally or sourcing from someplace where you know you can trace the manufacturing and the parts back to making sure you're able to get them? And how do you know where you sit in the order of criticality for them? That was a long answer, but it's really about knowing what's the most critical processes within your organization and making sure you're able to continue those and or pivot them right now as well.
And Amy, this is Kara again. Could you take that more broadly too? And I'm just thinking out loud, like, everyone's business, what they're doing is the most important thing to them because it's what they do every day. And I'll use TAO as the example. Like, we host a lot of events. That's really important. And so we wanted to share like all the updates of things that we're doing, but we took a step back and realized that everybody is really worried about what they're doing. So like, the more concise communication that we could have, more upfront, that kind of streamlines it, was better for our ecosystem. Because we were not critical to most folks' businesses today.
Yeah, but I think in some ways you are, as far as doing things like this, where you're pulling people together and making sure that they have the conversation around what's going on in this crazy world and able to connect and benchmark with others and think about things differently. So, you know, it's a little bit of a pivot. It may not be about event planning as far as getting people in the same room to discuss something, but providing valuable information for them just to continue operations is pretty important.
Thank you for saying we're pretty critical. I think we are. And if there's no more questions or comments or any, I mean, we'd love your closing thoughts, but you've teed me up perfectly to talk about what's coming up next.
I'm going to turn it over to you. And I just humbly appreciate the opportunity to speak to y'all. If you ever need anything, you know, reach out. I'm happy to help however we can. We have a lot of amazing people at Point B that this is what we do, and we love doing it. We love helping our clients be successful. So I'm going to end there and turn it over to Kara again.
Well, Amy, thank you. I don't know that we're doing rounds of applause on the phone, but if folks want to put fun emojis in their Zoom to clap for you, I'm going to go ahead and give you one. That was great. Thank you. All right. So Comcast's business is amazing, and we have 4 more of these that they are currently supporting. So we are working on getting something together for Friday, where we'll actually talk about something that Amy touched on, which is virtual schooling, and what that looks like both for us as individuals and how we are keeping that equitable. While none of the folks on our survey had a challenge connecting to the internet or having the infrastructure at home that they needed to continue working, that's not the case for everybody in our community. So we're going to explore what that looks like, how to continue to be mindful of that, and where potentially we can help with our partners at Free Geek. So I'll go ahead and ask you to put your thinking caps on, but if you have old computers that you are not currently using, they are pretty out of supplies to help not just people work remotely, but really kids in the Portland metro area do virtual schooling. So we're going to explore some of that. And then next week, Ashley, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about our virtual programming on the 31st, and y'all check back. We should have these up end of day today, first of the morning tomorrow. But we're actually going to have Comcast Business talk to us about critical infrastructure. So Ashley, if you want to add a little bit about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we will just kind of, Tom is going to be our presenter, Tom Hazing, and really just go through and highlight all the tools and resources needed while working from home. So what kind of connectivity, what kind of, voice, video communications would be needed, any type of collaboration tools. So just high level, what tools will actually be needed while working from home. I know, many of us, it will be several weeks at that point, but what else kind of high level can we think about and maybe add to a business continuity plan for future use as well?
Fantastic. Awesome. So if Ashley, Amy, if y'all don't have anything else,
I'm good.
Justin, you're good. Ashley, you're good.
I'm good.
Justin, nothing else from any of our attendees?
Nope.
I will close us and say to the folks that joined us today, and our presenter and our sponsor, thank you so much. We are grateful for Point B. We are grateful for Comcast Business. And for those of you joining us, this is our first attempt at a webinar that was not a lunch and learn that we transitioned last week. So our timing is not quite perfect, but we're getting there, and we appreciate you all working through us as we approach programming from a virtual and innovative way. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to share it, things we can do better, things that you'd like to see in the future, and I think that's it. And with that, I will say have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to, air quote, seeing you in person soon. Close air quotes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.